My family has always loved traveling. Growing up, we went on frequent road trips across America, and more recently we went to Europe. I've been in small towns, big cities, and been in the middle of nowhere. My favorite thing about traveling is that I never know what I'll expect. Each experience is unique. Whether it's listening to old radio dramas atop a camper in a Colorado ghost town, playing intense games of Dutch Blitz with Amish children in Pennsylvania, witnessing severe unrest during the Brexit vote in England, being moved to tears at the Harry Potter set in London, being held up by strikes in France, seeing the desperation of children in Honduras, watching my dad haggle with a gypsy in Spain, or finding a hot springs in the middle of a sheep field in Iceland, I've been able to see many different sides of the world. There's immense beauty in the cultures of the world, and I've learned a great deal from the history of these places. My heart has been moved seeing the suffering that people experience, even in our own country. Seeing and experiencing other ways of life has given me such compassion and motivated me to try and make a difference. Nursing has always interested me because of the science, the people, and the vast opportunities. Travel nursing allows my love for travel to be intertwined with my compassion for those who need care. Jesus says in Mark 10:45, "For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." Many of my family's travels have stemmed from historical and meaningful places in our family history. Each summer we visit Lake George in New York, which is in upstate New York, where my grandfather grew up. The Newkirks have been going there since 1925, and we've had a lake cabin up there since 1936. It is there where I feel most at peace. Several times we've driven across the country to New York, taking a different route each time. My favorite route was the northern route, where we went up through Canada. This was my first time out of the country, and it was very exciting. Absolutely everything sparked excitement in me, even going to the grocery store and seeing that the grocery labels were translated into French. I still have many pictures of items that we didn't have here in America. This really sparked my desire to see and experience what the world had to offer. Another route was straight across from Colorado. This really taught me that there are small and unassuming places everywhere, and each place has its own stories, no matter how small. Marceline, Missouri, for example, was where Walt Disney grew up. It was so interesting to see the humble beginnings of Walt Disney, who was raised in this little town in the middle of Missouri. Had we not stopped for lunch, we would have missed seeing where Disney made his first illustration as a child and his writing desk as a boy. On our way to New York, we always stop in one of our favorite places, Lancaster, Pennsylvania. There, we stay with family and visit our Amish friends. The Amish choice of a simpler life is humbling, to say the least. They work so hard for their children and are the epitome of an honest living. I really respect their faith and truly love the families that I've gotten to know. I never would have been exposed to the Amish community if it hadn't been for my aunt really diving into the culture when she moved there. This taught me an essential virtue of travel, docility. Docility means having a willingness to learn and to grow, gaining truthful knowledge, then applying it to our lives. Learning from other cultures is an integral part of travel, and if one is closed to new ideas, that enrichment and growth is lost. In 2016, we recreated my grandparents' wedding trip from 1951 in honor of what would have been their 65th anniversary. We took a ship up the eastern seaboard to Canada, then across the pond to Dover, England. Pond is quite the exaggeration. We experienced over 30-foot waves, making me very seasick, but with the help of motion sickness patches and pressure point bands, it turned into a fun roller coaster. When we got on land in Dover, we immediately left the theatrics and shelter of the ship and were met with protests and strikes. We were in England during the heat of the Brexit debate. The trains were on strike as a means of protesting the wave of immigrants coming to Dover by boat. We took a taxi to another town and by some miracle made it on the last train to Cambridge. When we first arrived in Cambridge, we stayed in a small traditional English home. We walked on streets from before the 1400s. The cobblestone streets mixed with the freshness of the rainy English weather was truly beautiful, and I was utterly enchanted. I first fell in love with tea at the local tea shop called Fitzbilly's. When we were walking, we came upon a classic British post box, where my dad stopped and said, "This is the exact post box Papa mailed his letter of marriage proposal to Nana." I can imagine him pacing back and forth, thinking of how this would change the course of his future, and this is where he mailed it. My grandfather Jack was mailing his letter of proposal to my grandmother Carol, who was here in the States. They were the first Americans to be married in King's College Chapel. England was still dealing with the aftermath of World War II, so their friends had to scrape together sugar rations to make them a little wedding cake. We were able to go to a service at King's College Chapel and participate in evensong and hear the famed King's College Choir. We were also able to go up on the roof of the chapel and walk on stairs from before the 1500s. The stairs had massive indentations from so many people walking on them from centuries past. It was so wonderful to see the legacy of travel that my grandparents left behind. Travel often opens life up to spontaneity. You have to be flexible and adapt when things do not go as planned. Each trip I've been on is full of unexpected moments and experiences. Each place and the people there teach me different lessons about history, culture, and how the world works. In Europe, we were there during an intense time of unrest. The most turbulent city by far was Paris. There were fears of terrorism as the World Cup and the Israeli peace talks came to the city. The flooding of the Seine River caused paintings like the Mona Lisa to be evacuated from the Louvre. When we first arrived in Paris, my expectations failed me. I'd never seen anything like it. The city was supposed to be full of love, beauty, and sophistication, but I just didn't see it. People were drinking whole bottles of liquor on the street. Not one person was without a cigarette, and there were people everywhere shouting that they were cab drivers, trying to take our luggage and put it into their trunk. My dad had to yell at them to get them to leave us alone, and no one on the street seemed bothered by this incident. Everyone in France was on strike, and I do mean everyone. Public buses were down, air traffic control, garbage collectors, trains, just everyone. We barely made it out of Paris to our next destination, Madrid, Spain. The train ride from Paris to Madrid was certainly interesting. When we first arrived on the train, we got on a train car that was full of people, and when a man and his security guard kicked everyone else off of the train car, except us. We were obviously confused and didn't really know what to make of the situation, but when the security guard unzipped his bag briefly, we saw a machine gun in it. My older sister, who speaks Spanish, asked the man who he was and why everyone else was kicked off of the train car. The man simply whispered, "El Presidente." All wide-eyed, we all looked at each other. It turns out we alone were riding in a train car with the Prime Minister of Spain. He was very unpopular in Spain at the time due to backlash regarding unemployment and recession. He was evidently in a lot of danger, but an American family with 3 girls, all under the age of 18, that had no idea who he was, wasn't much of a threat. In Madrid, we stayed with our missionary friends. It really taught me that you learn the most from the locals, and if you really want to dive into the culture of a place, you really need to be with the company of those who live there. We went back to London, where terrorism was a fear again, as thousands of people gathered to celebrate the Queen's 90th birthday. It was chaotic yet fascinating. We went from the US to Canada to Ireland to England to France to Spain, back to England, then to Iceland, all in 1 month. It was so interesting to see how each place worked, the food, the landscapes, and the culture. Some of my most impactful trips have been service trips. In middle school, I went to the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota, which is the poorest zip code in America. It really hurt my heart to see the alcoholism, abuse, and poverty these children experience. Last spring, I went on the Honduras practicum. There, I witnessed such terrible living conditions. Touring their homes, we saw how difficult their lives were. They made their houses out of abandoned sheet metal, cardboard, anything they could find, really. We helped pick lice out of the children's hair, and it took me an hour and a half just to clean one girl's hair. Because they slept on dirt floors, the lice would just come back, so our help was only a temporary fix, and I was really sad we couldn't take away this discomfort completely. The club we worked with was called the Breakfast Club, and it was run by a woman named Chaito, and she was so kind to let us into the lives of the children she so loved. Going there made me realize how much I want to share God's love and share joy with people from all walks of life. We weren't saviors by any means. We were there to work alongside what Chaito, the moms, and World Gospel Outreach had already established. Chaito really taught me the true meaning of service, helping people with no expectation of reward. They were gracious enough to share their culture and share their joy with us. And it was a privilege to be with them, even if it was just for a week. The Hondurans were some of the most joyful and kindest people I've ever met. They will always have a special place in my heart, and I will not soon forget them. This is one reason why I want to be a nurse. Nurses are needed everywhere, so I have the potential to go all over the world. To me, it is the highest honor if someone trusts you with their health. It is a privilege to care for people. Nurses are by the bedside more than the doctor, so you're able to build relationships with the patient. I've always had a nurturing side to me, but I've always had a tender heart for babies. I guess I've always been fascinated by how life is brought into the world. The science of pregnancy and delivery and how the baby is taken care of afterward has always been fascinating to me. So in November, I was able to shadow a NICU nurse named Peggy Martin at St. Luke's Presbyterian. The NICU, or the Neonatal Intensive Care Unit, is for babies that were born prematurely or have other serious health problems. I worked with 2 babies primarily when I was there. I cannot say their real names because of patient confidentiality, but we will call them Jack and Michael. Jack was born at 25 weeks and was 2 months old when I saw him. While there, I got to watch the nurse intubate Jack. When a doctor or nurse intubates a baby, they open the baby's trachea to insert a breathing tube attached to a breathing machine. He fought the tube, so he was writhing and shaking, but he really needed it because his oxygen levels were very low. It broke my heart because I could tell by his facial expressions that he was crying, but no sound was coming out because of the tube in his trachea. It was really, really sad to watch a baby this small, so young, go through so much pain. Michael was born at 25 weeks, and he weighed 2 pounds when I saw him. To give you a perspective, this is one of his diapers, and it was still loose on him. My time with him was precious. I got to listen to his heart with the smallest stethoscope ever, and the palm being no bigger than my fingertip, held onto my pinky. It was so wonderful to be with them. However, it was heartbreaking to see them attached to breathing tubes, feeding tubes, and live in incubators where their parents could only touch them and not hold them. As heartbreaking as this was to see, they were lucky to receive such care. Around the world, this is not often the case. According to UNICEF, 79% of newborn deaths globally are related to preterm birth. If proper care and supplies could be put in place, this would significantly reduce the number of deaths with newborns and maternal deaths. I'd love to be a part of a process that brings neonatal care worldwide. There are so many different organizations that bring healthcare worldwide. This is especially relevant during the current COVID-19 crisis. Some of these organizations include Mercy Ships, World Vision, Samaritan's Purse, and Project Cure. Normally, these organizations would go abroad on mission trips, taking volunteers, and going to under-resourced countries. However, they've inverted their focus to the U.S., the current COVID-19 crisis in the U.S. Mercy Ships has hospital ships in the New York Harbor and Los Angeles. World Vision is providing basic necessities to low-income areas across the country, and Samaritan's Purse has a temporary hospital set up in Central Park. Project Cure is also donating supplies to hospitals in the U.S. and abroad. In early March, I was able to shadow at Project Cure. I shadowed Bethany Slangen, who's the Cure Director for Clinics and Training. So what she does is she helps train nurse and doctor volunteers that go on these mission trips. What they do at Project Cure is collect spare medical supplies from hospitals across the U.S. and go to places like Honduras, Ghana, and the Philippines. They go with nurse and doctor volunteers and set up healthcare clinics to under-resourced areas. When I originally asked to shadow them, they asked if I wanted to go to Honduras with them in May. Unfortunately, it was right during finals, but hopefully one day I'll be able to go on a trip with Project Cure. It was very interesting to see the behind the scenes of a nonprofit. They're just as important as the frontline people, and they really are generous. I interviewed a woman who's a labor and delivery nurse in Africa. She really exhibits the virtues of courage and selflessness. She works full-time, has 3 kids, and helps her husband with his side business. I don't know how she does it, but I so admire her for picking up her life and moving abroad to bring care and share the gospel with others. Her current home is very dangerous, but she says it's so worth it. Being a traveling nurse became more of a possibility in my mind after I spoke with her. When I asked for advice in pursuing this career field, she simply told me, live with people that are different than you. Any chance you get, be with people different than you. Every aspect of travel has the potential to be purposeful. For me, I want that purpose to be travel nursing, but for you, it really could be anything. Seasoned travel writer Thomas Swick claims there are 7 joys of travel: anticipation, movement, break from routine, novelty, discovery, emotional connection, and heightened appreciation of home. From the moment you decide on a destination to the moment you return home, the travel experience will be one you will not soon forget. When you go, think about some virtues you can aspire to while traveling: docility, courage, kindness, service, purposefulness, perseverance, respect, and gratitude. With these in mind, you can travel with purpose. The important thing to remember is to be a well-rounded human being. It is vital to see and learn from those that are different from you. St. Augustine said, "The world is a book, and those who do not travel read only a page." So go be with people different than you. Go explore, travel. The world is waiting.